Dying. It's not something many of us want to dwell on, but as it's Wills Month, there's no better time to think about getting your affairs in order. Amanda Morrall is with us, and she's going to tell us everything we need to know. First question's got to be, roughly how many people have a will in this country?
Apparently in New Zealand, it's 50%. So there is a huge number of people who are, without a will, which leaves them at risk of dying intestate should they leave this mortal world.
Let's take the 50% that don't have a will,
okay.
And what happens to their finances if they haven't, well, they haven't got left a will.
Right, so if you don't have a will, then whatever remaining assets you have will be divided up according to a formula or a prescribed sort of division of your assets under the Administration Act. So there's an assumption that, most of your wealth will go to your partner. Mm-hmm. That's actually not the case. They will get the first 155,000 of your estate, whatever personal chattels you leave behind. Then, if you have kids, the kids will get 2/3 of the remainder, and your partner will get about 1/3 of that. Now, if there's no kids in the situation, it's a similar formula, except your parents will end up with the remaining 2/3.
That 155, is that including the value of your house, or...?
Well, they'll sum up, they'll do
the
a
whole
grand,
estate,
yeah, they'll
everything.
tally up everything you've got there and start dividing.
You mentioned kids. I mean, people that have kids should obviously, have a will.
That's right. That's one thing that needs to be factored into your will if you do have kids. There's a risk then, particularly if both parents should die in a car, God forbid, in a car accident or whatnot, and you haven't specified who you would like to have custody of your children, you leave those kids at risk of a potentially, emotionally fraught, long, drawn-out, expensive court battle over their care. So, take some time to think about who you would like and what's in their best interests. And
so presumably you get a family member or a friend to say, would you take care of the kids if the worst happens to both of us?
Right.
How do you... So then the will has to be drawn up so that you're actually providing for your children from your estate as well, don't you?
Yeah, well, they'll factor that all in as well, and they'll include your life insurances. So the important thing is getting some... I mean, a lot of people want to do the DIY approach because they want to save themselves money, but there's a lot of considerations, if you've got, house, multiple assets, bank accounts, then the kids. It's those things that you don't know about that will hurt you in the will. Right. So a lawyer or somebody with some, the public trust with a lot of experience in these matters will guide you through the decision-making process and, make sure you've got everything, all your I's dotted and your T's crossed. Okay, so that's, we've seen it in the movies back in the day, get the quill in the ink and my dying wishes. Yeah.
That's not worth the paper it's written on if we did that now.
No, my grandmother did one of those, and unfortunately ended up really badly. It was an ugly, long, drawn-out, expensive affair that would have, she'd be rolling over in a grave she knew about it. No, a will has to be properly witnessed and signed by two people who aren't beneficiaries in the will. So there is nothing wrong with a handwritten will per se, but you do run the risk of not factoring in some of these things we were mentioning earlier. So that's where it helps to get some professional guidance. Okay, is that then expensive, really? Because... Not really. I mean, I paid $150 for mine. I don't have, a huge amount of complex issues at stake, so it was relatively simple. The public trust will do it for you, depending on whether they're named as an executor, for between $200 and $300. So you're not talking about a lot of money. I guess if you do have a lot of assets at stake and a fairly complicated situation, you could be looking of, closer to $1,000. Right, so you walk in and you go, oh, look, I've got this house that I've got a big mortgage on, and I've got, I don't know, the dog and a couple of kids. How do I divide that up? And then they just take your word for it and they just schedule this out and it's all done. So nothing's really checked. That's, so I could... Oh, there will be some things. For example, if you have some foreign assets, there may be some complexities around that. So they'll make sure you've, gone through the whole checklist. And get you to get it right. Yeah, because everybody's situation is unique, so they'll cover all the odds. You mentioned executors there. Now, what does the executor do, or the trustee of the will do? There are two different roles, but the executor will be the one person who sits through and goes through your wish list and makes sure everything's done according to your wishes, whereas the trustee, if you are willing some assets to your children, for example, and they're not eligible to take control of those until they turn 20, they'll manage that money for on their behalf until they're ready to take it over. So the important thing with the executor is you name somebody who can hold it together. you know, in the event of your death, because they will have to, you know, it'll be tough times, obviously, with all the grief and whatnot, but you want that person to be up for the challenge and the task and to keep it together so you can, you know.
Well, that sounds like somebody that you trust, right? Which is probably going to be a friend, which is probably someone that you're going to leave some money to in the will. Can you do that? Can that executor still be a beneficiary?
They can be a beneficiary. My sister is named, and she will rise to the challenge. I have no doubt there. And so, yeah, just you got to think about it carefully, though, and ask that person if they want to be, you know, take that role as well. Because I don't think people want to be put in that position, you know, by surprise.
At what age should we start thinking about wills?
Well, I guess anybody over the age of 18 can start thinking about it, but I think unless there's any assets at stake worth, you know, willing or fighting over, you don't really need to do it. But it's, generally speaking, it's those big life stage events that will put you in the will category. For example, getting married, buying a house, having kids, divorce. And keep in mind, with your changes in your circumstances, you might have to update your will as well along the way.
Is that easy to do? Because there are. I mean, life's a movable feast, isn't it?
It is, yeah. No, it's always easy to get on the horn to your lawyer and say, look, my situation's changed, getting a divorce, Let's
change a few things, yeah. How is this dealt with elsewhere in the world? Because just from, I don't have many dealings with lawyers, but a friend of mine, his dad's a lawyer, and he says, have you got a will? And he drums it into me, and he's probably the kind of person that would profit if I didn't have a will and it all became all very difficult, because he's a lawyer, right? That's the person you go to try and sort it out.
You sound very
mistrustful. Are saying, get these things done, aren't they?
Well, they are, but listen, if you, they won't benefit as much by you having will in place if you don't, because that's when all the money gets fought over upon court and gets very expensive.
That's what I mean. He's doing himself out of a job. He's saying, Rod, get a will, because otherwise they're going to make a fortune, you know. And so lawyers don't like to have to go through all this whole thing as well. And it's such a big thing that overseas now, you were telling me that they've actually got Will Day. And
I think it's a great idea. Overseas, and I think in Canada and the UK, they have a free wills month where actually it's sponsored by the charities. So they put up their own lawyers, presumably, to do the job. You can get it done for free, and in the hopes that I suppose you'd leave a little bit of money to charity.
What a good idea.
I think it's a brilliant idea.
All righty. Thank you very much, Amanda.